The snow hadn't stopped in 3 days. It fell like ash across the open prairie, softening the world until fences disappeared and trees looked like ghosts in their winter coat. Somewhere between the white sky and the white earth, a boy walked alone. He was no taller than a stack of firewood, no heavier than a bale of hay, and the way his boots dragged behind him spoke of someone who hadn't rested in a while. His name was Eli Cawthorne, and he was 6 years old. He had on one mitten and a coonskin cap 2 sizes too big. The edges of his jacket were frayed, patched with canvas and stubborn hope. His breath puffed out in little clouds, and in his left hand, clenched tight and blue at the knuckles, he held a slingshot, not as a weapon but a talisman. Ahead stood a crooked old ranch house, unpainted wood, roof sagging slightly on the north side. A barn leaned into the wind beside it, and in front of the cabin, splitting logs in a silence deeper than the snow, stood a man. The boy stopped 5 paces away and stared. The man was a giant, or near enough, broad in the chest, with arms that looked carved from timber and a face half covered by a peppered beard. He wore no hat, though the snow clung to his long dark hair and settled on his shoulders. His name was Harlan Creed, and for 7 years he had spoken to no soul unless it was absolutely required. There had been no wife, no children, just this cabin and the silence he'd earned through loss. Eli didn't blink. He took 2 steps closer, chin lifting with the small courage of a child who'd already seen worse. "She's tied in ropes, sir," the boy said. "Mama said you can save her." Harlan paused in mid-swing. The axe hovered. His eyes narrowed, not cruelly, but like someone waking from a dream they didn't ask to enter. "Where?" "By the rocks. Tall ones. Past the frozen creek." Harlan lowered the axe slowly. Snow crunched as he stepped toward the boy. No other words passed. He went inside for his coat, came out with a rope and a rifle, just in case, and nodded once to Eli. "Show me." They walked together into the woods, the boy's hand disappearing into Harlan's palm. Not once did the man ask questions. Not once did the boy cry. The journey through the pines was quiet save for their breath and the occasional call of a crow. Eli kept pointing forward, his boots slipping in the ice-packed dirt, but his eyes didn't lose focus. "She was tired, sir," he whispered once. "She told me to run if they came back. I waited. They didn't come back." After half a mile, the trees opened into a clearing. On the far edge, rocks jutted from the earth like teeth, worn by years and softened by snow. Against one of them, half slumped and tied at the wrists, sat a woman. She was not old, not young either. Her dress was torn at the hem, her hair matted, her face pale but proud. Her name, Harlan would learn later, was Celia Cawthorne, aged 28. She looked up at him without fear, just resignation. Harlan crouched. His voice was soft, almost inaudible. "Do you want help, ma'am?" She nodded once, then tilted her chin toward the rope. The knots were rough, made by hands used to cruelty. Harlan worked them carefully, his large fingers moving as though they might hurt her if they weren't gentle. When the rope fell away, she didn't collapse. She straightened. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked, but it was steady. "Can you walk?" "Not far. I'll carry you a ways." She didn't argue. When he lifted her, she weighed nothing. She winced, but said nothing. Her eyes stayed on Eli, who smiled faintly. Harlan walked with care, avoiding the roots, stepping lightly over ice patches. She leaned into his chest without pride, her fingers clutching the front of his coat. That night, Harlan Creed did something he hadn't done in years. He let strangers sleep under his roof. Eli curled up beside the hearth on a pile of quilt. Celia sat on a stool by the fire, her eyes on the flames, her hands cradling a chipped mug of tea. She hadn't asked why Harlan lived alone. He hadn't asked what happened to her. But both knew enough from silence. The stew simmered. Snow tapped the windows. After some time, she spoke. "His father's gone. He tied me up. Said he'd come back with coin for the boy. Meant to trade us off, maybe. But he got drunk and rode the wrong way. I reckon he won't come back." Harlan nodded. He didn't flinch. "The townsfolk?" They turned their heads. Some said I deserved it for marrying a gambler. Others just didn't want trouble. You're safe now. Her eyes lifted. She studied him then. The quiet strength, the shoulders heavy with a past he hadn't spoken of, the way his jaw worked like he was holding back every word that ever wanted out. She said, softly, thank you again. He didn't respond. Just poured her more tea and sat nearby, not close, just near enough that she'd feel it if she swayed. The days after were slow. She mended the torn curtains, swept the hearth, showed Eli how to feed the hens, how to whisper to the horse with a cracked hoof. Harlan watched, fixed the barn roof, sharpened tools. But he began to speak more. He told Eli about a dog he once had, named Smoke. He told Celia about a sister who died young, the way no one came when they cried for help, and how that sound still echoed if he closed his eyes at night. One day, Celia cut her hand fixing a fence rail. Harlan came running, breath caught. It's just a scratch, she said. I can get bandages. She laughed. First time he heard it. It warmed the room faster than fire. It's not your fault I'm bleeding, she whispered, eyes soft. He didn't understand why that line hit him so hard. But it did. Like she was saying more than just the wound. That evening, he carved something from pine. A little star, smoothed at the edges. He handed it to her. For the sky that stayed with me while I was tied. Her lips parted. She held it like a treasure. He didn't know what else to say. So he said nothing. Spring crept in. The snow melted in sheets down the roof. Eli chased chickens barefoot. Celia wore her hair unbound now. Her face looked fuller, her cheeks flushed. She laughed more. Once, Harlan caught her singing low near the stove. It was evening when it happened. A storm rolled in from the west, thunder rumbling low like cattle hoof. Rain beat the windows. Inside, the fire glowed gold. Eli had fallen asleep beside his mother, his head against her lap. Harlan stood by the window. I built this place to be alone, he murmured. After all that went wrong. After everyone left. Celia looked up at him. Her fingers stroked Eli's curls. But you stayed. He nodded. She said, you saved me. But not like a hero. Just by seeing me. He turned, slow. Crossed the floor. Knees creaked as he lowered himself in front of her. From his coat, he pulled a small ring. Silver. Worn but polished. It was his mother's. You don't have to say yes, he said. But if you want, you could stay forever. Her hands shook. I never cried when I was tied. Not even when he left me. But I'll cry now, she whispered. And she did. She said yes. Outside, the rain softened. And somewhere in the woods beyond, the rope she'd once been bound with was buried beneath the thaw. Inside, the boy stirred and smiled in his sleep. The house, once built for silence, now held 3 hearts, and none of them were alone anymore.